The massive alien ships appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system, like glowing jewels against the black of space. Their arrival sent waves of excitement and fear through every human colony from Mars to the outer mining stations near Jupiter. Humanity had been expecting this day for months, ever since their long-range sensors detected the approaching fleet. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, watching the alien vessels through the reinforced viewing ports. The ships were beautiful in a way that human technology could never match. The lead vessel looked like it was made from living crystal, its surface shifting between blue and silver as it caught the light from distant stars. Behind it came ships that seemed to be made of flowing gas held in impossible shapes, and others that appeared to be carved from single pieces of dark stone. 47 ships, reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson, his voice tight with nervous energy. Each one represents a different alien species in something called the Galactic Confederation. Rodriguez nodded, her weathered face showing no emotion. She had fought in the border wars on Titan and led the first human expedition to the Proxima Centauri system. She had seen enough combat to know that when someone shows up at your door with a fleet, they probably aren't just being friendly. The aliens requested permission to dock at Earth's primary orbital station. Their message came through in perfect English, translated by technologies that humanity could barely understand. The voice was calm and musical, speaking words that sounded like poetry. "Greetings, children of Earth," the message said. "We are the Galactic Confederation, the union of civilized species that has maintained peace in this galaxy for over 10,000 of your years. We come bearing gifts of knowledge and an invitation to join our great community." President Martinez called an emergency session of the Global Council. Representatives from every human colony and nation gathered in the great assembly hall on Earth, their faces reflecting the mixture of wonder and worry that gripped all of humanity. This was the moment they had dreamed of since the first human looked up at the stars and wondered if anyone else was out there. The alien delegation was led by Ambassador Veltar, a being that looked like a walking sculpture made of blue crystal. Its voice came from speakers built into its chest, since it had no mouth as humans understood the concept. Beside Veltar floated Ambassador Wisp, a creature of gas and energy contained within a suit that looked like a transparent bottle. The third member of their group was called Stone Singer, a massive being that appeared to be carved from black rock, with glowing veins of gold running through its surface. "We have watched your species with great interest," Veltar said, its crystal body catching the light from the assembly hall's windows. "In less than 100 of your years, you have spread to 17 star systems. This is remarkable progress for such a young species." The human representatives leaned forward in their seats. This was what they wanted to hear. Recognition that humanity was special, that they had achieved something important. "However," Veltar continued, and the mood in the room shifted like a cold wind, "your expansion has been somewhat concerning to the established members of the galactic community. You have claimed worlds without permission, established colonies and systems that were designated as neutral zones, and shown a disturbing tendency toward aggressive behavior." President Martinez stood up slowly. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but she had the kind of presence that made entire rooms fall silent when she spoke. "Are you saying we've done something wrong?" Stone Singer answered, its voice like grinding granite. "Not wrong, young human, merely unguided. You are like children playing with tools you do not fully understand. We offer guidance. We offer a place in the greater community of species." Ambassador Chen Wei-Lin, Earth's top diplomat, was handed a datapad containing the Confederation's formal offer. As he read it, his face grew pale. The other human representatives watched him with growing concern as his expression shifted from hopeful to shocked to quietly angry. "According to this document," Chen said carefully, "humanity would be required to abandon our colonies in the outer 17 systems. We would be allowed to keep Earth, Mars, and 3 other systems under Confederation monitoring. Our expansion would be limited to 1 new system per decade, and only with Confederation approval. Our military would be reduced to local defense forces, and all human ships would be required to carry Confederation observers." The alien delegates nodded, as if this was perfectly reasonable. These are standard terms for newly integrated species, Wisp said, its voice like wind through leaves. Every species must learn to exist in harmony with the galactic community. Individual expansion leads to conflict. Conflict leads to destruction. We have prevented wars for 10 millennia by maintaining these guidelines. Rodriguez, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. And what happens if we refuse? The three aliens exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey volumes despite their completely different forms of existence. Refusal would be most unfortunate, Veltar said finally. The galaxy has achieved perfect peace through cooperation. Species that choose not to cooperate find themselves in difficult positions. The implied threat hung in the air like smoke. Chen looked at the data pad again, then at President Martinez, then at the assembled human representatives. Every person in the room understood what was happening. This wasn't an invitation. It was a demand backed by the threat of force. President Martinez stood again, her small frame somehow seeming to fill the room. Ambassadors, we appreciate your offer. However, humanity needs time to consider such an important decision. How long can you give us? One of your solar rotations should be sufficient, Stonesinger rumbled. 1 year for your species to see the wisdom in joining the galactic community. After the aliens left the assembly hall, the real discussions began. Scientists pointed out that the Confederation clearly had technology far beyond anything humanity possessed. Military leaders noted that 47 species working together could field fleets that humanity couldn't hope to match. Economists calculated the cost of abandoning the outer colonies and concluded it would set human civilization back by decades. But something else was happening in the room. Rodriguez saw it first in the faces of the younger representatives, the ones who had grown up hearing stories of humanity's expansion to the stars. Then she saw it spreading to the older delegates, the ones who remembered when humans were confined to a single world and dreamed of the day they would walk on alien suns. It was the same look she had seen in the eyes of her soldiers during the border wars. The look that said, nobody tells us where we can and cannot go. Admiral Torres, the head of humanity's deep space fleet, cleared his throat. With respect, Madam President, I'd like to point out something about these aliens. They're offering us the same deal they probably offered every other species. Give up your independence, accept our limits, and we'll let you exist under our protection. President Martinez nodded slowly. And the fact that there are 47 species in their confederation suggests that 46 species before us said yes to that deal. Chen Wei-Lin looked up from the data pad he had been studying. There's something else. Look at their language, their approach. They genuinely seem to believe that we'll be grateful for this offer. They think they're doing us a favor by allowing us to surrender our colonies and accept their oversight. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. These aliens didn't just want humanity to submit. They expected humanity to be thankful for the opportunity to submit. Rodriguez smiled for the first time since the aliens had arrived. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Well, she said quietly, I think they're about to learn something new about human nature. The response came exactly 1 year later, broadcast on every frequency the aliens had provided. Ambassador Chen Wei-Lin stood before the cameras in the Global Council chambers, his face calm, but his eyes burning with quiet fire. Behind him stood representatives from every human colony, every nation, every settlement that had ever looked up at the stars and decided to reach for them. To the Galactic Confederation, Chen began, his voice carrying across space to the waiting alien fleet. Humanity has considered your generous offer with all the attention it deserves. On the bridge of the Crystal flagship, Ambassador Veltar and the other Confederation leaders leaned forward, ready to welcome the newest junior members to their galactic community. Our answer, Chen continued, is no. The silence that followed seemed to stretch across light years. On dozens of alien ships, beings that had never heard the word no from a newly contacted species stared at their communication screens in disbelief. Furthermore, Chen said, his voice gaining strength, humanity rejects any limitation on our expansion, any monitoring of our territories, and any interference in our development. We will continue to explore, settle, and claim any system we choose. If the Galactic Confederation has a problem with this, you are welcome to try and stop us. Ambassador Veltar's crystal form flickered through several colors that indicated extreme agitation. In the 47 species of the Confederation, no newly contacted civilization had ever refused their generous offer of membership. The very concept was beyond their understanding. "This is most disturbing," Stonesinger rumbled to his colleagues. "Perhaps they did not understand the terms? These humans may lack the intelligence to comprehend the benefits of Confederation membership." Wisp's gaseous form swirled with uncertainty. The translation devices functioned perfectly. They understood our offer. They simply rejected it. The Confederation leadership called an emergency session. Representatives from all 47 species gathered in the great meeting space aboard the Central Command ship. It was the first time in over 3 centuries that the full council had been assembled, and the mood was one of confused anger. "This cannot be allowed to stand," declared the Zephyrian Prime Minister, its crystalline voice ringing through the chamber. If word spreads that a species can simply refuse Confederation membership, other young races might get similar ideas. The architects, ancient beings of living stone who had been among the founders of the Confederation, spoke slowly and deliberately. "In our records spanning 12,000 years of galactic peace, no species has ever chosen conflict over cooperation. This human behavior is without precedent." General Kethvar of the Nathani Defense Corps floated in the center of the chamber, its gaseous form shifting colors as it spoke. Perhaps a small demonstration of force would help them understand their situation. A single patrol squadron could disable their orbital defenses within hours. The motion was approved unanimously. After all, what could one young species do against the combined might of 47 civilizations? The demonstration of force was assigned to Captain Velnoth of the Zephyrian Peacekeeping Fleet. He chose 12 ships for the mission, each one a masterpiece of crystal technology, capable of projecting energy shields that could deflect any primitive kinetic weapons the humans might possess. The target was carefully selected, a small mining colony on Kepler 442c, far from Earth, with a population of only 50,000 humans. The plan was simple, and had worked on dozens of other stubborn species throughout galactic history. Air River. With overwhelming force, disable a few military installations, accept the inevitable surrender, and escort the chastened aliens back to the negotiation table. Usually, the sight of Confederation technology in action was enough to convince any reasonable species to reconsider their position. But as Captain Velnoth's fleet approached the Kepler system, they began receiving reports that didn't match their expectations. Instead of fleeing civilian vessels and hastily surrendered military posts, their sensors detected something unprecedented. The humans were preparing to fight. "Impossible," Velnoth muttered as he studied the tactical display. "They have seen our ships. They must understand that resistance is futile." The mining colony had been transformed into a fortress. Asteroid mining platforms had been moved into defensive positions. The fusion reactors that powered the mining equipment had been reconfigured into makeshift weapons. Even the civilian transport ships were moving into combat formations. "Captain," reported his tactical officer, "the human vessels are broadcasting a message." "Let me hear it." The voice that came through the speakers was rough and tired, with the accent of someone who had spent years in the asteroid belt. "This is Commander Sarah Martinez of the Kepler Mining Consortium. You alien ships are entering human space without permission. You have exactly 1 minute to reverse course before we open fire." Velnoth's crystal form flickered with amusement. 1 minute? To reverse course? Do they not see our fleet?" "They see us, Captain," the tactical officer replied. "And they're powering up weapons." What followed was unlike anything in Confederation military history. The humans didn't wait for negotiations or demand terms. They simply attacked. The first wave came from the asteroid belt itself. Chunks of rock the size of buildings, accelerated to incredible speeds by magnetic launchers that the humans had somehow jury-rigged from mining equipment. The crystal ship's energy shields, designed to deflect the sophisticated energy weapons of civilized species, were not prepared for simple kinetic projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed. 3 Confederation ships lost their shields to the initial bombardment. As they struggled to reconfigure their defenses, the human fleet closed in with tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Human ships rammed Confederation vessels, their crews sacrificing themselves to damage enemies many times larger than their own craft. When their weapons ran out of ammunition, human pilots used their ships themselves as projectiles. Mining vessels designed for cutting through asteroids tore into the crystal hulls of the Confederation fleet, with industrial cutting beams never meant for combat. But the most shocking moment came when human boarding parties somehow managed to breach the hull of Velnoth's flagship. The captain watched in horror as figures in crude spacesuits came pouring through holes they had cut in his ship's crystal structure. These weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They were miners, engineers, farmers, and maintenance workers who had grabbed whatever weapons they could find and decided to fight. The Confederation forces had been trained for centuries in the art of civilized space combat. Energy shields, sophisticated targeting systems, and careful adherence to the rules of engagement that prevented unnecessary casualties. They had no idea how to deal with beings who fought with hand tools, explosive charges, and what appeared to be a complete disregard for their own safety. By the time Captain Velnoth managed to organize a retreat, half of his fleet was either destroyed or severely damaged. The mining colony, which should have surrendered after the first show of force, was still broadcasting defiant messages and preparing for the next attack. The report Velnoth sent back to the Confederation leadership was unlike anything they had ever received. "The humans," he wrote, "do not fight like any species we have encountered. They use their technology in ways that were never intended. They sacrifice their own lives to damage our forces. They treat every engagement as a fight to the death, even when retreat would be the logical option." Ambassador Veltar read the report 3 times before he could accept what it said. They destroyed 6 of our ships. A mining colony with no military training destroyed 6 peacekeeping vessels. The implications began to sink in across the Confederation fleet. If a small human mining colony could inflict such damage, what could their actual military forces do? What could Earth itself do if the Confederation tried to force compliance? For the first time in 10,000 years of galactic peace, the Confederation faced an enemy that preferred fighting to talking, destruction to surrender, and death to submission, and they had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Dr. Zathara had spent her entire career studying the behavior patterns of intelligent species. As the Confederation's leading expert on xenopsychology, she had helped integrate 17 different civilizations into the galactic community. She understood how rational beings thought, how they made decisions, and how they could be persuaded to see reason. But the data streaming across her screens made no sense at all. "Run the analysis again," she told her research assistant, a young Nathani named Drifter of Thoughts. "There must be an error in the psychological profile." Drifter of Thought's gaseous form shimmered with nervousness. "I have run it 7 times. Doctor, the results are consistent. The humans appear to be the first spacefaring species to evolve directly from apex predators." Dr. Zathara's crystal structure flickered through several colors of disbelief. In all her years of study, she had never encountered anything like this. Every known intelligent species in the galaxy had evolved from peaceful origins. The Zephyrians had developed from crystal formations that grew by absorbing nutrients from their environment. The Nathani had evolved from gas clouds that reproduced by merging harmoniously with others. The architects had emerged from geological processes that prized stability and gradual change above all else. Even the more recent additions to the Confederation followed the same pattern. The builders had evolved from hive insects that worked together to create massive structures. The singers had developed from plant-like beings that communicated through beautiful harmonies. The deep swimmers had evolved from aquatic creatures that moved in peaceful schools through their world's vast oceans. Every intelligent species in the galaxy shared the same fundamental trait. They had learned cooperation before they learned to fight. Violence was something they understood intellectually, but it went against their deepest instincts. "Show me the human evolutionary history again," Dr. Zethara commanded. The holographic display filled with images that made her crystal form dim with shock. Humans had evolved on a world filled with massive predators. They had survived ice ages by hunting creatures 10 times their size. They had developed tools not for building or creating, but for killing from a distance. Their entire social structure was built around organizing group hunts against prey that could easily kill any individual human. "Look at this," Drifter of Thoughts whispered, highlighting a section of the data. "Their legends, their stories, their cultural heroes. Every other species tells stories about great builders, wise teachers, or beings who brought peace. Human stories are about warriors, hunters, and conquerors." Dr. Zethara studied the cultural analysis with growing horror. Human children played games that simulated combat. Their entertainment focused on conflict and competition. Their sports were based on mock battles between opposing groups. Even their peaceful activities like chess were essentially war games disguised as strategy exercises. "They're not like us," she realized, her voice barely a whisper. "They're not like any of us. They evolved to be killers, and everything they've built since then is based on that foundation." The report she filed sent shockwaves through the Confederation leadership. For the first time in galactic history, they were dealing with a species that actually understood violence at a genetic level. Humans didn't just use force as a last resort when diplomacy failed. They saw conflict as a natural part of existence. Admiral Korthak of the Confederation Defense Fleet called an emergency meeting of the military leadership. Representatives from a dozen species gathered in the war room aboard the flagship, studying tactical displays that showed the expanding human presence in contested space. "The psychological report explains much," Admiral Korthak said, his stone-like features grim with concern. "But it does not tell us how to defeat them." General Whisptar of the Nathani forces floated in the center of the room, her gaseous form swirling with anxiety. "Our standard tactics assume that our opponents will behave rationally. They will retreat when faced with superior force. They will surrender when defeat becomes inevitable. They will negotiate when the cost of fighting becomes too high." "The humans do none of these things," added Commander Velseth of the Zephyrian fleet. "They fight when they should retreat. They continue attacking when they should surrender. They choose death over reasonable compromise." The tactical displays showed the evidence. In system after system, human forces had engaged Confederation fleets with tactics that defied every principle of civilized warfare. They used fusion reactors as bombs, turning their own ships into guided missiles. They hid weapons inside civilian vessels, making it impossible to distinguish between military and non-military targets. They even used asteroids as weapons, nudging them into orbit-crossing trajectories that threatened entire planets. "Here," Admiral Korthak said, pointing to a display showing the battle at Proxima Centauri. "A single human destroyer faced 3 of our cruisers. Instead of attempting to escape or requesting terms for surrender, the human ship rammed our flagship at maximum velocity. The resulting explosion destroyed all 4 vessels." The alien commanders studied the data in stunned silence. The human ship had been vastly outgunned and had no chance of victory in a conventional battle. But instead of accepting defeat, the human crew had chosen to die while taking as many enemies with them as possible. "It makes no strategic sense," muttered General Kethpar of the Architect Forces. "They gained nothing from that sacrifice except the destruction of their own forces." "Unless," Dr. Zethara said quietly from the back of the room, "you understand that they weren't trying to win that battle. They were trying to teach us something." The military leaders turned to look at the xenopsychologist. Her crystal form was dim with exhaustion from weeks of studying human behavior patterns. "Every human defeat has been a victory in disguise," she explained. "When they lose ships in hopeless battles, they're showing us that they're willing to die rather than submit. When they use suicide tactics, they're demonstrating that fighting us will be more expensive than we can afford. When they refuse to negotiate after losing, they're proving that no amount of force will make them reasonable." The implications began to dawn on the assembled commanders. They weren't fighting a war in any sense they understood. They were dealing with a species that treated death in battle as preferable to peaceful surrender. "How many species like this might exist?" Admiral Korthak asked, voicing the question that haunted them all. Dr. Zathara's response chilled every being in the room. In our survey of 200,000 star systems, we have found exactly one world that produced apex predators intelligent enough to reach the stars. The probability suggests that such species are incredibly rare, which means that in 10,000 years of galactic exploration, we have never encountered anything like humanity. We have no protocols for dealing with them. Our entire understanding of civilized behavior is based on species that evolved to avoid conflict, not embrace it. The meeting continued for hours, but no solutions emerged. Every strategy they discussed assumed that their opponents would eventually see reason and agree to negotiate. But humans seemed to view negotiation as a sign of weakness and compromise as a form of defeat. As the various commanders and analysts filed out of the war room, Admiral Korthak remained behind, staring at the tactical displays showing human expansion across dozens of star systems. Each point of light represented a colony that would fight to the death rather than accept Confederation oversight. Each system was a potential battleground where the humans would use tactics that violated every assumption about how intelligent beings should behave. For 10,000 years, the Confederation had maintained peace by being reasonable. They had convinced species after species that cooperation was better than conflict, that submission to galactic order was preferable to the chaos of independent expansion. But humanity had evolved from a world where cooperation meant organizing, better hunting parties, where submission meant death, and where chaos was just another word for opportunity. The galaxy had never seen anything like them, and as Admiral Korthak studied the reports of human attacks across the frontier, he began to realize that the galaxy might not survive the encounter. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on the neutral world of Harmony Prime, a beautiful planet where representatives from all 47 Confederation species had gathered to solve problems through peaceful discussion for over 8,000 years. Never before had the Great Assembly Hall been filled with such fear and confusion. Speaker Velthara of the Crystal Assembly called the session to order, her crystalline form projecting calm authority despite the chaos that gripped the galaxy. "We are gathered here to address the human crisis," she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. In the past 6 months, human forces have conducted unprovoked attacks on Confederation territories in 17 different systems. The assembled representatives stirred uneasily. Many of them had never experienced war in any form. For species that had evolved from peaceful origins, the very concept of organized violence was difficult to understand. Ambassador Driftsong of the Nathani rose from her position among the gaseous representatives. "The attacks follow no pattern that our military analysts can understand," she reported, her voice like wind through leaves. "Human forces strike deep into our territory, cause maximum damage, then withdraw before we can respond effectively." "They're not trying to hold territory," added General Stonebreaker of the Architects, his massive form carved from black granite that seemed to absorb light. "They appear to be trying to break our will to fight." A holographic display in the center of the chamber showed the latest reports from the frontier. The Zephyrian colony at Kepler 186 had been attacked by human ships that emerged from hyperspace already firing. Instead of targeting the military installations, the humans had destroyed the planet's orbital manufacturing platforms and disappeared before the defense fleet could respond. The Nathani listening post in the Wolf 359 system had been infiltrated by human commandos who somehow managed to survive in the vacuum of space long enough to plant explosives on the station's fusion reactor. The resulting detonation had been visible from 3 star systems away. Most disturbing of all, the Architect mining facility in the Gliese 667 system had been destroyed by what could only be described as a weaponized asteroid. The humans had somehow nudged a 2-kilometer rock into a collision course with the mining station, turning a natural object into a planet-killing projectile. "They're using our own assumptions against us," observed Dr. Velkara, the Confederation's chief strategic analyst. "We expect attacks to follow logical patterns. We assume that rational beings will minimize casualties and limit destruction. The humans do neither." Representative Singh Harmony of the peaceful chorus species raised a tentacle in question. "Perhaps We could offer them better terms, more territory, advanced technology, full membership instead of junior status. A bitter sound emerged from the speakers around Speaker Velthara's position. It took a moment for the universal translators to identify it as laughter, specifically human laughter, from intercepted communications. "We tried," Admiral Korthak reported grimly. "After the attack on the Kepler colony, we broadcast an offer of full Confederation membership with no territorial restrictions. The human response was to attack 3 more of our systems and broadcast a message that our translators rendered as too little, too late." The representatives began talking among themselves, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sounds, light patterns, and chemical signals. The universal translators struggled to keep up with dozens of different languages expressing the same sentiment. "Panic! Order!" Speaker Velthara called, her crystal form flashing with authority. "We must find a solution to this crisis." But solutions proved elusive. Every strategy they discussed had been tried and had failed. Overwhelming force hadn't worked. The humans seemed to welcome superior numbers as a challenge rather than a deterrent. Negotiation was impossible because the humans refused to talk. Economic pressure was meaningless because human colonies were largely self-sufficient. Representative Deep Current of the aquatic swimmers made a suggestion that sent ripples of shock through the assembly. "What if we simply avoid them? We have millions of systems in the galaxy. Perhaps we could establish boundaries that both sides agree to respect." "Impossible," Dr. Velkara responded immediately. "Human expansion patterns show no regard for existing territorial claims. They settle systems based on their own criteria, not on our territorial maps. Any boundary we establish, they will eventually cross." The debate continued for hours, but gradually a horrifying truth began to emerge. Every option they considered assumed that the humans could be reasoned with, bargained with, or deterred through rational means. But the evidence suggested that humanity operated according to principles that no other species understood. As reports continued to flow in from the frontier, the scope of the crisis became clear. Human attacks weren't random acts of violence. They were part of a coordinated campaign designed to spread fear and uncertainty throughout Confederation space. On the beautiful garden world of Serenity, where the peaceful builders had created living cities that grew like flowers, panicked civilians were demanding military protection that their government had no idea how to provide. The builders had never fought a war because they had never needed to. Their entire civilization was based on creating beauty and harmony. The singing crystals of the resonance worlds were broadcasting discordant notes of fear across their networks, disrupting the musical communications that had connected their species for millennia. The very concept of deliberate violence was so foreign to them that their language had no words to describe what the humans were doing. Even the ancient architects, who had helped found the Confederation, were showing signs of strain. Their geological thought processes, which normally operated on timescales of centuries, were being forced to adapt to human tactics that changed from moment to moment. "They're winning," Representative Driftsong said quietly, her gaseous form swirling with defeat. "The humans are winning, and we don't even understand what game they're playing." The realization hit the assembly like a physical blow. In less than a year, a single species that had never been part of the galactic community had managed to shake the foundations of a civilization that had maintained peace for 10,000 years. "How is this possible?" demanded Speaker Velthara. "We have 47 species, billions of ships, populations in the trillions. They have 17 systems and maybe a few million people." Dr. Zethara, the xenopsychologist who had first identified the human threat, stood to address the assembly. Her crystal form was dim with exhaustion, but her voice carried clearly through the chamber. "Because we've been fighting the wrong war," she said simply. "We've been trying to defeat them militarily, but that's not how this works. The humans aren't trying to conquer our territory or destroy our fleets. They're trying to break our civilization." The silence that followed her words was absolute. Representatives from species that had never known fear were learning what it felt like to be helpless. "Every attack they make weakens our confidence," Dr. Zethara continued. "Every victory they achieve proves to our people that the Confederation cannot protect them. They're not fighting for territory or resources. They're fighting to prove that peace is an illusion and that only the strong survive. The assembly began to understand the true scope of what they faced. Humanity wasn't just another species seeking a place in the galactic community. They were a force of nature that challenged everything the Confederation believed about civilization itself. As the session continued deep into the night, it became clear that the galaxy had changed forever. The age of peaceful coexistence was ending, and nobody knew what would take its place. 18 months after the peace talks had failed, the galaxy was a very different place. The great communications networks that had once carried messages of harmony and cooperation between star systems now buzzed with reports of human fleet movements, tactical updates, and increasingly desperate pleas for help from Confederation colonies that found themselves in the path of human expansion. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the CNS Indomitable, a captured architect dreadnought that had been renamed after humanity's most decisive victory. The ship's original builders had designed it to project peaceful authority across star systems. Under human control, it had become something else entirely, a symbol that the old galactic order was dead. The bridge still bore scars from the boarding action that had taken the ship. Human engineers had patched the holes in the crystal walls with crude metal plates, and the elegant alien control systems had been replaced with human interfaces that prioritized function over beauty. It wasn't pretty, but it worked, and that was very human indeed. "Admiral," reported Captain Chen Rodriguez's tactical officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. It's marked for your eyes only." Rodriguez nodded and walked to her private communications station. The message that appeared on her screen was brief and to the point. Galaxy-wide broadcast scheduled for 1400 hours Earth time. Be ready. For months, human forces had been conducting what military historians would later call the terror campaign. Not because humans were trying to cause terror, but because terror was the inevitable result when a peaceful galaxy encountered a species that treated warfare as a natural extension of diplomacy. The campaign had been remarkably successful. Human fleets had penetrated deep into Confederation space, striking targets that had been considered absolutely secure. The Zephyrian core worlds, protected by energy shields that had never failed in 3,000 years of operation, had watched in horror as human ships emerged from hyperspace inside their defensive perimeter and destroyed their orbital shipyards before disappearing again. The Nathani home system, a collection of gas giants that housed billions of their people in floating cities, had been evacuated after human commando teams had somehow infiltrated their atmospheric habitats and demonstrated that even beings made of gas could be vulnerable to determined attackers with the right equipment. Most shocking of all, the architect homeworld itself, a planet covered in living cities that had been growing for millennia, had been forced to evacuate its outer settlements after human forces had somehow weaponized the planet's own geological processes, causing artificial earthquakes that threatened to topple structures that had stood since before Earth's first civilizations. But it wasn't just the military victories that had shaken the Confederation. It was the growing realization that humanity's idea of warfare was completely different from anything the galaxy had ever seen. When Confederation forces won a battle, they typically accepted the surrender of enemy forces and incorporated them into the galactic community through negotiation and compromise. When human forces won a battle, they made it clear that the victory was just the beginning of a much larger campaign that would continue until their opponents completely submitted. When Confederation forces lost a battle, they retreated to defensive positions and requested negotiations to prevent further casualties. When human forces lost a battle, they analyzed what had gone wrong, adapted their tactics, and came back stronger than before. The psychological impact was devastating. Species that had known only peace for thousands of years found themselves unable to cope with an enemy that viewed every setback as a learning opportunity and every victory as encouragement to push harder. At exactly 1400 hours Earth time, every communications network in the galaxy received the same transmission. It came through on emergency frequencies, override codes, and diplomatic channels simultaneously. There was no way for any civilized world to avoid hearing it. The image that appeared on screens across the galaxy showed Ambassador Chen Wei-Lin, standing in what was clearly the bridge of a captured alien warship. Behind him stood human officers wearing uniforms that mixed their own designs with captured alien technology. The message was clear before he even spoke. Humanity was winning. "People of the galaxy," Chen began, his voice carrying across light years to billions of listeners. 18 months ago, the Galactic Confederation offered humanity a choice. They told us we could accept their limitations on our expansion, submit to their oversight of our colonies, and take our place as junior members of their community. Chen paused, looking directly into the camera with the same expression he had worn during the original peace talks. "We said no then. We say no now. But our position has changed." The transmission switched to a tactical display showing human-controlled territory. What had been 17 systems 18 months ago had become 43 systems, with human colonies expanding in every direction. Humanity no longer recognizes the authority of the Galactic Confederation to limit our expansion or dictate our policies, Chen continued. "We claim the right to settle any system we choose, to defend our colonies by any means necessary, and to respond to threats against our people with whatever force we deem appropriate." Across the galaxy, alien leaders watched the broadcast with growing horror. This wasn't a negotiating position. It was a declaration that humanity considered itself exempt from the rules that governed civilized behavior. "However," Chen said, and something in his tone made every listener pay closer attention, "humanity has no interest in ruling over other species or destroying civilizations that pose no threat to us. We are not conquerors in the sense that the Confederation understands conquest." The tactical display changed to show current human fleet positions. Instead of surrounding and occupying alien worlds, human forces were positioned along the expanding borders of human space, creating a clear boundary between human and alien territory. "What we demand is simple," Chen continued. "Recognition of human territorial sovereignty, the right to expand our civilization without interference, and treatment as equals in any future galactic government, not as junior partners to be managed by our supposed betters." The transmission switched to images from captured Confederation databases, showing species after species accepting junior status in exchange for protection and stability. The message was clear: humanity would not be following that pattern. "The Confederation has 3 options," Chen said, his voice taking on the tone of someone delivering an ultimatum. "First, you can continue to fight us, in which case we will continue to demonstrate that your superior technology and greater numbers cannot overcome our superior motivation and tactical flexibility." Images flashed across the screen, showing the wreckage of Confederation fleets, the evacuation of alien colonies, and the growing list of human victories across the frontier. "Second, you can attempt to negotiate with us from a position of strength, in which case we will show you exactly why that position is an illusion. We have proven that we can strike any target in Confederation space. We have demonstrated that we can survive and thrive under conditions that would destroy other species. We have made it clear that we prefer death to surrender." The images now showed human colonies that had fought to the last defender, rather than submit to Confederation occupation, turning every victory into a costly and Pyrrhic affair. "Third, you can accept the new reality. Humanity is not going away. We are not going to submit to limitations imposed by others. We are not going to accept junior status in a community we did not ask to join. We will continue to expand, and we will fight anyone who tries to stop us, for as long as necessary and with whatever methods prove effective." Chen stepped closer to the camera, his face filling screens across the galaxy. "The choice is yours. But understand this. The age of galactic peace maintained through forced conformity is over. You are now sharing the galaxy with a species that believes conflict is natural, strength is respected, and freedom is worth dying for. You can learn to coexist with us as equals, or you can learn to live in fear of us as enemies." The transmission ended, leaving billions of alien beings to contemplate a galaxy that had suddenly become a much more dangerous place. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Rodriguez watched the reactions flooding in from across Confederation space. Some species were calling for total war against humanity. Others were demanding immediate negotiations. A few were already broadcasting their recognition of human territorial claims and their desire for peaceful coexistence. But all of them were learning the same lesson. The galaxy now belonged to whoever was strong enough to claim it, and humanity intended to claim their share.